All right, joining us now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and Newsmax contributor Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, it's always great to have you with us, especially when something as important happens as it did today. Now, you said the Mueller report would be devastating for President Trump, but he and his supporters seem to think he's been vindicated. What's your take?
Well, both of us are right. He's been vindicated legally, but factually, morally, politically, there's a lot in there that will be used by Democrats to try to show that although he may not have committed criminal conduct, he certainly committed conduct that's not desirable by a president. That's exactly why there should never have been a Mueller report. The tradition of the Justice Department, a very good one that we remember back from when Comey violated it with Hillary Clinton, is that when you decide not to charge somebody with a crime, you then don't write a series of essays, or in this case, a book, about all the bad things that they did that didn't amount to criminal conduct. That seems to be very, very unfair. And that's the negatives that have come out of this for President Trump. The positives are that there's no case against him for either obstruction or for collusion.
And one of the things that seems to be lost on all these Democrats that are just beating up on William Barr is the fact that he was not required by law to even release this report in the first place, right?
Not only was he not required, but the whole thrust of the change of the special prosecutor law to the special counsel law was in reaction to the Starr report, where all those salacious things were made public, even though there was really no criminal conduct, certainly no impeachable conduct against President Clinton. And here we have conclusions that there's no criminal conduct, although in the obstruction, there's no exoneration. But nonetheless, all the evidence, the negative evidence, is laid out in great detail. That raises some very serious questions about what the role of prosecutors are, because especially prosecutors make one-sided investigations. They don't try to find exculpatory evidence. That's why I urge everybody to wait for the Trump legal team's response and read them side by side. Also, I think the report, I graded it in something I've written, and I gave the legal analysis a C+. It's very, very weak legal analysis. Barr and Mueller fundamentally disagree as to whether a president can be charged with obstruction of justice if the act involved was a constitutionally authorized act like pardoning or firing. And Mueller says yes, and Barr says no, and Barr gets far the better of the argument, which is why Barr concluded.
All right, let's delve into that a little bit more with some of the details about that aspect of it. This is a specific passage on the matter of obstruction, and I'm quoting the report here. If we had confidence after the thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we aren't able to reach that judgment. It continues with respect to whether the president can be found to have had obstructed justice by exercising his powers under Article 2 of the Constitution. We concluded that Congress has the authority to prohibit a president's corrupt use of his authority in order to protect the integrity of the administration of justice. Now, this is what you were talking about, right? There did seem to be a fundamental disagreement on this issue.
Right. And there are two questions. One, does Congress have the authority to tell a president what he can do and what he can't do? I think the answer to that when it comes to exercising his power under the Constitution is no. But even if it's yes, there's another principle of law that was essentially ignored here, and that is when you have a statute of general application like obstruction of justice, it's inapplicable to the President of the United States unless Congress has specifically said it's applicable. The report quotes that principle, but then proceeds to ignore it because the obstruction of justice statute is a catch-all. It covers everything, particularly covers things that are done by ordinary people. Is it applicable to a president who engages in constitutionally authorized actions? Barr is right about that. I'm right about that. Mueller is wrong about that.
A lot of people argue today that this seemed to basically be a referral for an impeachment proceeding in the House of Representatives. That seemed to be where Mueller wanted to lead these members of Congress. Do you think that's what he was trying to do?
Oh, I have no doubt about that. I predicted months ago that he would provide a roadmap to Congress for further investigations, impeachments, also a roadmap for other prosecutors in various districts of the United States. And he's done exactly that. That's appropriate if you do it discreetly. That is, if you send confidential memos to other prosecutors saying, here's some leads to cases, or to members of Congress, here's some leads to impeachment. But when you issue a public report that includes innocent conduct, non-criminal conduct, however conduct that is condemnable but not criminal, that really violates the long tradition of the Justice Department in the same way that Comey violated the traditions of the Justice Department when he accused Hillary Clinton of being sloppy with her emails after concluding that she committed no crime.
2 questions left, 2 minutes left as well. First question is this. If Donald Trump is not president of the United States someday in the future, whether it's after the 2020 campaign or after the 2024 election, when he'd be termed out of office, do you think there's still a prospect that he could face an indictment?
No, and that's exactly what the Mueller Commission says. They said they didn't base their decision on the fact that a sitting president can't be indicted. He just didn't commit any crimes. And you can't be indicted unless you've committed crimes. And there were no crimes here.
What about in some of the other spin-off investigations that have resulted from the initial Mueller probe, some of the stuff that's been handled in other districts?
Well, some of them are strong, some of them are weak, and we have to wait and see. Of course, it's very easy to get people to plead guilty because the sentencing disparities are too great. You add a 0 to your crime if you plead guilty or not guilty. If you plead guilty, you get 2 years. If you plead not guilty, you get 20 years. So there's tremendous pressure on people to plead guilty. So nobody should take a guilty plea as absolute evidence that the person is guilty. I've seen people opt to plead guilty rather than to face the roulette wheel of a trial and then a tenfold sentence for it.
And we've heard way too much about that in this whole discussion about the need for criminal justice reform, just the onerous experience of trying to defend yourself in the criminal justice system. All right, this is my last question for you, Professor Dershowitz. Now, you talked about the tradition of the Justice Department. William Barr seems to be more of a traditionalist in that sense, but is there any going back from this where we've been? It seems like there's a lot of demand for revenge now. Other investigations that are being talked about going back in time and investigating Obama-era officials. How do we move forward from this?
Well, I'd like to see mutual disarmament. I'd like to see everybody stop criminalizing political differences and stop using investigations for partisan purposes. I include there Republicans who are clearly going to try to open up investigations as to the Steele report and the FISA warrant. There are real questions and problems about that, and they should be looked into that by the Inspector General of the Justice Department. But I don't want to see political differences turned into crimes by either side.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, one of the best pieces of advice we can give everybody, definitely pay attention to what's going on today, but take a deep breath. There's a lot more that we're going to learn over the next 24, 48, 72 hours as we have a better chance to digest this report. And Professor Dershowitz.
I have a book coming out on the Mueller Report where I wrote the introduction. I just finished it. I read the report today and wrote the introduction, so we'll have it in the stores next week.
Well, I look forward to reading it, and I look forward to having you back to talk about it. Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz, always great to talk to you, sir.
Thank you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel. Newsmax TV is now available for free on your smartphone. Just go to your iPhone or Android store and download the free Newsmax TV app. Then you can watch free TV news with an American spin anytime, anywhere in the world. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.